Hi, I am Meera. I will be your guide throughout the session about service contracts in Indian Railways. I am here to ensure your learning journey is both engaging and insightful. Let's start with the learning objectives of this training session. Explain the meaning of contracts and their necessity in Indian Railways. Identify and classify the various types of contracts in Indian Railways and describe their unique management steps. Evaluate the qualification criteria for bidders and analyze disqualification scenarios, supported by real-life examples or case studies. Assess the role of financial elements, such as earnest money deposit, EMD, and performance bank guarantee, PBG, in ensuring compliance and reliability in service contracts. Design a bid evaluation framework, including criteria such as work experience, financial standing, and tender types, to simulate the bid evaluation process in Indian Railways. Before we start, let's meet Ankit, a bright and enthusiastic intern. Hi Ankit, welcome.
Hi Meera, thank you for giving me the opportunity to learn about service contracts in Indian Railways in detail.
Ankit, I'm glad to have you here. Service contracts are a crucial part of Indian Railways, and I'm sure you will find this journey both insightful and engaging.
I am equally excited and looking forward to it.
Alright, let's get started, but before we dive into our topic, let's take a moment to discover some fascinating facts about Indian Railways.
Sure.
Indian Railways is the fourth largest railway network in the world, covering over 68,000 kilometers of track. It employs over 1.2 million people, making it one of the largest employers globally. Every day, Indian Railways carries around 23 million passengers. That's like transporting the entire population of Australia daily. The first train in India ran on 16 April 1853 between Mumbai and Thane, covering just 34 kilometers. The platform at Hubballi Junction in Karnataka is the longest in the world, stretching 1,507 meters. Indian Railways operates premium luxury trains like the Palace on Wheels and Maharajas Express, offering a royal experience on tracks. Indian Railways is striving to become a net zero carbon emitter by 2030, promoting sustainability through solar-powered stations and electric locomotives. Isn't it fascinating how Indian Railways connects not just places but people, cultures, and progress?
Absolutely Meera. Indian Railways is the lifeline, bringing together diverse regions and fostering growth through its extensive network.
All right. Let's dive into our topic now. Now, we will have a look at the module outline. This module covers several topics, which we will explore one by one. Complete the module to unlock your Service Contract Expert Badge, a token of your mastery in railway service contracts. Let's start the topic Service Contract in Indian Railway. Click the highlighted tab to learn more. Let's understand what is a service contract and why is it required. Indian Railways, as the national transporter, depends on both internal and external stakeholders, including numerous small and large businesses, to provide components and services essential for its operations. To ensure the smooth functioning of the railway network, these businesses play a vital role. As outsourcing gains importance across departments, officials in Indian Railways and external stakeholders need more exposure to the execution of service contracts. To meet this need, consolidated training materials on service contracts are essential. Service contracts streamline operations by allowing Indian Railways to focus on core activities while external agencies handle ancillary tasks. Proper understanding and execution of these contracts ensure cost efficiency, compliance, and quality service delivery across the railway network. This presentation provides an overview of service contracts.
Okay, but what exactly is a contract? Can you explain in more detail?
Sure, Ankit. Let's go over it. As per Indian Contract Act 1872, contract is a legally enforceable agreement that creates mutual obligations and rights between the involved parties. To ensure the fulfillment of commitments related to supplies by various business parties, railways require binding agreements with external stakeholders for supply commitments. As per Section 10 of the Indian Contract Act 1872, agreements must be made with free consent, lawful consideration, and a lawful purpose to be enforceable by law.
So, what I understand is that a contract is essentially a legal agreement between two or more parties where each party agrees to specific terms and conditions.
Good job, Ankit. You have nailed the definition of a contract.
But I have a question. Is a contract always written?
Not necessarily. Contracts can be written, verbal, or even implied through actions. However, written contracts are preferred, especially for clarity and legal enforcement.
Interesting. And for what all purposes are the contracts used for?
That is exactly what we are going to discuss next. Contracts are vital for managing services, goods, and projects in Indian Railways while ensuring accountability and compliance. Click each element to learn more about the role of contracts in Indian Railways. Legal framework for clarity. As contracts provide a legal framework that governs relationships between parties involved in the provision of services, supply of goods, or construction projects, ensuring that all parties understand their rights and obligations. Specific terms and conditions. Contracts help specify the terms and conditions of services or goods, including details such as timelines, prices, quality standards, and penalties for non-compliance, thereby reducing the chances of misunderstandings. Risk management and dispute resolution. Contracts assist in managing risks by clearly outlining responsibilities and liabilities, and can define measures for handling disputes, offering a pathway for resolution. Budgeting and financial planning. In Indian Railways, contracts are essential for budgeting and financial management, helping estimate costs, manage expenditures, and plan for future investments. Accountability in performance. They hold parties accountable for their performance, ensuring that services and goods meet the required standards. Regulatory compliance. Operating under various regulatory frameworks, Indian Railways must use contracts for procurement and service provision, ensuring compliance with government regulations and policies. Transparency in procurement. The contract bidding process encourages transparency and fairness in procurement, helping source the best services and products at competitive prices. Performance monitoring. Contracts often include provisions for monitoring performance, ensuring that the contractor adheres to the agreed upon standards and timelines. So basically, contract is essentially an agreement where one party allocates work to another party in exchange for payment. The other party assumes responsibility and risk for the work in return for profit.
Okay, That means it's about the mutual transfer of risk and reward based on an agreed arrangement that benefits both parties involved.
Yes, exactly.
What does contract mean in the context of outsourcing in railways?
It includes the agreement or work order, schedule of rates, conditions of contract, and any related documents like drawings or tender forms. Let's now discuss the structure of the contract. The key principles of the structure of a contract are: railway contracts, whether works or service contracts, must adhere to the general conditions of contract issued and amended by railways from time to time. Execution of contracts must align with the Schedule of Powers (SOP) granted to various executive levels. Canons of financial propriety, which ensure responsible public spending. General Financial Rules (GFR) 2017 that promote efficiency, transparency, and fairness in public procurement.
Meera, could you elaborate on how the canons of financial propriety and general financial rules impact contract execution?
Sure, Ankit. CFP ensures public funds are used responsibly, avoiding extravagance, while GFR 2017 ensures efficiency and fairness in procurement. Together, they guide adherence to the Schedule of Powers, enabling proper execution of railway contracts.
Makes sense. How are these principles monitored during execution?
Through audits and periodic reviews.
Thank you for clarification.
You are welcome. Now let's understand what is Canons of Financial Propriety and General Financial Rules, GFR 2017 in more detail. The Canons of Financial Propriety are fundamental principles that provide guidance for the responsible and ethical use of public funds, ensuring transparency, accountability, and prudence in government spending. The core principles of Canons of Financial Propriety are: expenditure should not exceed the necessity of the occasion, and railway servants must exercise vigilance similar to handling of personal funds. Authorities cannot sanction expenditures benefiting themselves directly or indirectly. Public money should not benefit individuals or specific groups unless the expenditure is minimal. A legal claim supports the payment and the expense aligns with a recognized policy or custom. Allowances, like travel, should cover costs without becoming a source of profit. The General Financial Rules, GFR 2017, are a set of guidelines issued by the Government of India to ensure efficiency, economy, and transparency in procurement and treat suppliers fairly and promote competition. Describe procurement needs clearly, objective, functional, measurable, and avoid specific brand preferences unless necessary. Purchase quantities aligned with actual requirements to avoid excessive inventory costs. Follow a fair, transparent, and reasonable process for inviting offers. Ensure the selected offer meets requirements and the price is reasonable for the quality provided. Now that we have covered the Canons of Financial Propriety and the General Financial Rules, GFR 2017, let's move on to understanding what an SOP is and its significance.
SOP?
Yes, SOP stands for Schedule of Powers, which outlines the administrative authority and financial limits assigned to officials of different level for decision-making and approvals. Let's understand further. SOP specifies the financial powers of officers in railways, delegated from top to bottom. The purpose of the SOP is to define which officer can sanction various expenditures and the associated restrictions, such as budgetary ceilings, finance concurrence, and GM's or board's approval. The SOP outlines the levels and conditions for tender committees, TC, and tender accepting authorities, TA, with a power hierarchy of railway board greater than zonal headquarters greater than field officers, and senior officers having greater authority than junior officers. Unless specified otherwise, every step in the process requires prior finance concurrence at the appropriate level. SOP guides the file routing process for permission and sanctions of proposed works and service contracts. Before we move forward, let's check your knowledge about service contracts. Why are contracts essential in Indian Railways? Select the correct option and click Submit. Ankit, what do you think is their most critical role of contracts in Indian Railways?
Yes, I would say ensuring smooth operations and accountability.
Great answer. Another question, how many types of contracts are there?
Many I would say, but I am not sure.
No worries, we will now learn about the types of contracts. Indian Railways contracts are of two types, expenditure contracts and earning contracts. Expenditure contracts are further divided into three types, stores or supply contracts, works contracts, and service contracts. Before discussing service contracts in detail, let's briefly go over the other types of contracts in Indian Railways. Click on each element to learn more about the types of contracts. Earning contracts involve contractors making payments to railways for specific activities. Railways earn from awarding the contract. For example, operating four-wheeler and two-wheeler stands, platform and train publicity, stalls like restaurants, tea stalls and bookstalls, etc. Work contract are governed by Para 1203 of the Engineering Code of Indian Railways. They include work related to the engineering department executed through contractors. These contracts have various types, such as zone works, special works, for example, construction of bridges, embankments, and building materials procurement. They also come in different forms, including schedule, zonal, lump sum, EPC, and consultancy contracts. Stores contracts involve the procurement of items, materials, and spares for railways through the stores department at various levels like zonal, divisional, and depot, with two types, stock items like frequently needed and stored at depots, and non-stock items like procured as needed, charged to relevant revenue heads or works programs. Contracts are not signed directly. There are several essential steps involved in managing any type of contract. Pre-tender process involves the planning, preparation, and approval of the tender schedule, NIT, and tender document. Advertisement, uploading on website, clarification to bidder, pre-bid conference and submission of tender comes under tender invitation. Then tender opening follows, where the briefing note, comparative statement, and any special conditions are discussed. Once the briefing is complete, the tender committee or accepting authority negotiates, makes counter offers, and decides on the acceptance or rejection of the offer. And finally, the letter of acceptance is issued. Before calling tender offers, There are a few important points to be taken care of. Survey scope of work, details, design and drawing, estimate preparation and sanction, likely time of completion, type of tender, preparation of tender schedule, notice period, tender offer validity, GCC and special conditions, SCC, and specifications. Eligibility criteria. The estimate, based on the scope of work, must be prepared and sanctioned by the competent authority after finance concurrence. Large works have two types of estimates: abstract for an overview and detailed for a more thorough breakdown.
Wow, there are so many types of contracts and steps to manage them.
Yes, Ankit. Now that we understand the different types of contracts, let's discuss service contracts in detail.
Sure, that's our main topic, right?
Exactly. A service refers to any procurement other than goods or works, including maintenance, housekeeping, consultancy, training, etc. In other words, it is the procurement of a public good for its intangible material benefit. Does not cover individual appointments under specific laws, rules, or regulations. The need for service contracts has risen significantly in areas like housekeeping, station cleaning, and consultancy. Service contracts involve financial, administrative, and operational risks, requiring effective coordination across departments, for example, accounts, contractors, vigilance. In 2018, Indian Railways framed General Conditions of Contract (GCC) for services to ensure uniformity and guide tender processes. Let's understand some fundamental principles of contracting. Click on each element to learn more. Railways refers to the President of India or authorized railway officers. Bidder refers to a person, firm, cooperative, or company bidding for services. Two-packet system refers to bidding system where technical and financial bids are submitted separately, with technical bids evaluated first. Acceptance powers for service contracts in Indian Railways are categorized based on monetary values and the respective accepting authorities. Please note Chairman RRB can exercise CHOD level powers up to Rs 500 crores for recruitment tenders and approve quantity variations for RRB service tenders at zonal railways if the revised agreement value remains within their tender acceptance limits. These acceptance powers are reviewed and revised by Ministry of Railways from time to time. Before we move forward, let's check your knowledge about service contracts. Drag and drop the answers in front of the scenarios in the drop boxes.
Meera, I'm curious. How does Railways ensure that bidders are serious about their tenders or proposals?
Ankit. One of the ways is through earnest money deposit or EMD. It's like a security deposit that bidders must pay to show their commitment.
Oh, interesting. What happens if a bidder backs out after submitting the bid?
You have asked some very important questions. Why don't we discuss them in more detail?
That sounds great.
Earnest money deposit, EMD, is a monetary deposit collected from bidders to ensure their commitment to a contract and discourage non-serious participation. It is forfeited if the bidder withdraws, amends, or violates the terms during the bid validity period. The purpose of EMD is to ensure the bidder's sincerity in participating in the tender process and to safeguard against risks of withdrawal or non-compliance. The amount of EMD shall be 2% of the estimated cost of work for contract up to Rs 1 crore, while for contracts valued at more than Rs 1 crore, it shall be Rs 2 lakhs plus 0.5% of the excess of the estimated cost of work beyond Rs 1 crore, subject of a maximum of Rs 1 crore. EMD may be forfeited if the bidder withdraws, modifies, or fails to comply with tender conditions during the validity period. It is required as per tender stipulations and must be deposited in prescribed forms like demand drafts or checks. EMD is refunded to unsuccessful bidders within 15 days after the award of the contract or bid validity expiration. For the successful bidder, it is refunded after receiving the performance security. As per MSME Act of Government of India, MSME registered firms, startups are entitled for getting relaxation in tender cost and exemption in EMD. As we understand the concept of earnest money deposit, EMD, as a way to ensure bidders' commitment during the tendering process, let's now explore the Performance Bank Guarantee, PBG, which comes into play after the contract is awarded to ensure the contractor fulfills their obligations effectively. Performance Bank Guarantee, PBG, is a financial instrument provided by the contractor supplier to ensure fulfillment of contractual obligations, serving as collateral to compensate the buyer in case of non-compliance or inadequate performance. The purpose of PBG is to assure the buyer of timely delivery, quality standards, and compliance with contract terms, reducing financial risk in case of non-performance. The conditions for PBG require it to be submitted within 15 days of contract award, equivalent to 5% of the contract's total value, and to remain valid for the contract duration, including warranty plus 3 months. If not submitted on time, the amount may be deducted from the contractor's bills, with its release subject to satisfactory fulfillment of obligations. So, Ankit, what did you understand about EMD and PBG?
Well, AMD ensures bidders are serious and PBG ensures the contractor delivers as promised.
Exactly. One safeguards the bidding process, and the other protects the contract execution. The rates of EMD and PBG are decided from time to time and updated on Railway Board website.
Got it, Meera. Both works together to ensure trust and accountability.
Before we move forward, let's check your knowledge about financial elements of service contracts. A contractor is required to submit a performance bank guarantee, PBG, for 5% of the contract value to ensure compliance with the terms. If the contractor fails to perform as agreed, the railways can claim the amount from the PBG. What is the main purpose of the performance bank guarantee, PBG? Select the correct option and click Submit. Ankit, do you know how we decide which bidders are eligible to apply?
Is it based on some set conditions?
Yes, we call it qualification criteria. These criteria are detailed in General Conditions of Contract for Services framed by Railways and also outlined in GEM General Terms and Conditions, that is GTC. It helps ensure only eligible applicants with the right skills and resources can participate.
Oh, so it's a way to allow only qualified bidders for the tender?
Exactly. Let me explain how these criteria work. First, let's look at the eligibility criteria for bidders. Click on each number to learn more about the bidders. An eligible bidder can only submit one bid per process, either individually or as a partner in a joint venture. Submitting or participating in more than one bid leads to disqualification of all associated proposals. A bidder cannot act as a subcontractor while submitting a bid individually or as part of a JV in the same process. The bidder must not be banned by any central government department or the Ministry of Railways at the time of submission. The bidder, or JV consortium member, must not have faced bankruptcy or insolvency in the last 5 years, supported by an undertaking. Bidders must ensure there is no conflict of interest during the process.
Meera, I have always been curious, how do companies manage massive railway projects together? Do they form some kind of partnership?
Exactly, Ankit. They often form joint ventures or JVs, where two or more companies collaborate by combining resources for a specific project. These agreements are strictly governed by Indian laws, even if one partner is foreign.
Interesting. Are there specific rules for forming these JVs?
Of course. Let's explore JVs. Click on each element to learn more about joint ventures. Definition: a joint venture, JV, is a strategic partnership where two or more companies collaborate and combine resources to achieve a specific project or goal. In the context of service contracts, joint venture agreements are governed and interpreted strictly under Indian laws, even if one of the members is a foreign entity. Conditions: a joint venture, JV, can have up to 3 members for single department services and up to 5 for multi-department services, with Indian firms required as the lead member if foreign members are involved. Responsibilities: in a joint venture, all members share joint and several responsibility for service delivery, with the lead member holding at least a 51% share, while other members must hold a minimum of 20% each for JVs with up to 3 members and at least 10% each for JVs with more than 3 members. Key rules: a joint venture is a business partnership where two or more companies collaborate, pooling their resources, expertise, and capital for a specific project or objective. In India, a JV is governed by Indian laws, including the Companies Act and Foreign Exchange Management Act, FEMA, ensuring compliance with local regulations. Even when foreign entities are involved, the JV must adhere to these legal frameworks, safeguarding national interests. Documents: the important documents required from JV firms are: notary certified copy of the partnership deed, consent of all partners to enter into the joint venture agreement on stamped paper, power of attorney, duly registered, in favor of one partner to sign the JV agreement and create liability, affidavit on stamped paper for proprietary firms or HUFs confirming sole proprietorship of the concern or authority of the Karta to act on behalf of the HUF. Approval and modifications: approval for changes in the JV structure lies solely with the railways. Modifications are restricted post-bid submission unless legally unavoidable, for example succession laws etc., and must not affect eligibility criteria. The lead member must remain unchanged, and any non-compliance is treated as a breach of contract, leading to penalties.
Meera, Can you clarify how Indian laws, like FAMA and the Companies Act, ensure compliance in joint ventures?
These laws regulate foreign involvement, safeguard national interests, and ensure adherence to local regulations, promoting transparency and legal alignment in JVs.
What about document requirements? Why are they so specific?
They establish accountability and ensure legal binding, especially for partnerships and proprietary firms.
And what about JV's modifications?
Railways strictly monitor changes to protect contract integrity, allowing modifications only under unavoidable circumstances, like succession laws.
I have one more question. Are there any disqualifiers as well for the bidders?
For sure, Ankit, you are getting smarter by the minute. Let's look at the disqualification criteria. The bidders shall be deemed disqualified if the bidding firm has not supplied any information while submitting the bid about employing or partnering or venturing with any retired railway gazetted employee and has not provided complete details of the retirement date of such employee or partner at the time of bid submission. The bidder fails to inform the tendering authority about his relation or shareholding of any gazetted officer in railway department in his firm. The bidder or any of its constituents has been penalized for violating labor laws 3 or more times in the last 2 years by the relevant authorities. Any of the previous contracts awarded to the bidder were terminated within the last 2 years in the respective railway units. A penalty equivalent to the maximum allowed under a previous contract has been imposed in the last 2 years in the respective railway unit. The declaration about penalties or past contract terminations or financial credentials is found false. The process for banning the bidder will be initiated as per the applicable rules. The detailed disqualification criteria is available in General Conditions of Contract for Services. Now we will discuss the bid evaluation system in Indian Railways. The technical criteria for bid evaluation are defined by the tender inviting authority in consultation with the finance department and are approved by the tender accepting authority. There are two package systems for contracts. The single package system is used for contracts up to Rs 50 lakhs, where both technical and financial bids are submitted together and opened simultaneously. The evaluation is done in 2 stages. First, the technical aspects are reviewed to ensure they meet the requirements, followed by the financial bid assessment. The two-package system applies to contracts over Rs 50 lakhs and for tenders over Rs 10 crores. It separates the evaluation of technical and financial bids. The technical bid is reviewed first, and the financial bid is considered only after technical qualification. Clarifications may be requested based on the submitted documents and are documented for audit. Plays a crucial role in service contracts within the railways. Here are the key responsibilities of the committee. The tender committee or evaluation team is responsible for reviewing and evaluating both the technical and financial aspects of bids to ensure compliance with the project's requirements. May seek clarifications from bidders regarding the technical specifications, processes, or other aspects of their bids, but only based on the documents already submitted by the bidder. Evaluates bids in separate stages, starting with technical evaluation, followed by financial evaluation once the technical bids are deemed compliant. All communications between the tender committee and bidders must be documented properly to maintain an audit trail and ensure transparency throughout the evaluation process. The committee is tasked with evaluating bids without being influenced by the financial aspects of the bids in the initial stages, especially in systems like the two-package system. The tender committee makes recommendations regarding tender finalization to the tender accepting authority, who is the final decision maker in the process. Ankit, we have covered a lot today: the eligibility criteria for bidders, joint ventures, the disqualification of bidders, and the crucial role of the tender committee. Do you feel more confident about how the entire process works now?
Absolutely, Meera. I now understand how important it is for the tender committee to ensure that only qualified bidders are selected. It's clear that the whole process is designed to be fair, transparent, and focused on compliance with technical and financial criteria.
Exactly. The tender committee ensures all bidders meet the required standards, safeguarding the process's integrity. Disqualification is key to maintaining fairness.
It's about selecting the right bidders and ensuring transparency through proper documentation.
Well said, Ankit. Excellent understanding. If you wish to delve in these topics further, you can refer to the General Conditions of Contract for Services issued and amended by Railways from time to time. These criteria are also outlined in the GEM General Terms Conditions. Before we move forward, let's check your knowledge about qualification criteria for bidders. Vishal is reviewing a bid for a service contract. The bidder, Raj Enterprises, has listed a retired gazetted officer as one of its directors and has been penalized for violating labor laws 3 times in the last 2 years. The bid is for a project worth Rs 45 lakhs. What should Vishal do regarding Raj Enterprises' bid? Choose the correct option and click on Submit. Ankit, before we go further, do you know the main types of tenders used in Indian Railways?
I'm familiar with open tenders and limited tenders, but I'm not sure about others.
Excellent. Broadly, there are 4 types: open tender, limited tender, single tender, and special limited tender. Each has its purpose and criteria. Open tenders are advertised publicly, allowing any interested contractor, supplier, or vendor to participate. While limited and single tenders are used for specific or urgent needs.
Could you please explain all the types of tenders in detail?
Let's continue. Click on each element in sequence to access the various types of tenders. Open tenders invite all eligible bidders, ensuring maximum competition and fairness. This method promotes transparency, equal opportunities, and accountability while delivering value for money. Open tenders are categorized into one package system. Technical and financial bids are submitted together and evaluated simultaneously. Two package system. Technical bids are evaluated first, and only qualified bidders' financial bids are considered. As the default method for most public procurement in Indian Railways, open tenders suit non-specialized, non-urgent projects, aligning with public interest and ensuring competition. Whereas limited tenders are used when open tenders are impractical due to urgency, specialized work, or the need for qualified contractors. They include special limited tender, single tender, and dispensing with tender, quotation, ensuring competitive bidding while meeting specific expertise and project needs. Special limited tender, used for urgent or specialized works, inviting a few qualified contractors, even if not on the approved list. Single tender. When under special circumstances urgency, the offer is taken from only a single agency. It is called single tender. Single tenders are not to be called for routine work. Tight targets are usually not accepted as reasons for calling off single tenders. Only in rare or emergent situations, with finance concurrence, accidents, breaches involving dislocation to traffic, powers to GM, Ford, DRM. AMC for equipment can be placed on single tender basis on authorized dealer on approval of AGM in zonal railways. Dispensing with tender, quotation. A formal tender process may be skipped, with direct quotations sought from selected suppliers or contractors, typically for low-value or urgent tasks. The purpose of limited tenders is to ensure expertise for specialized work, address urgent projects, and maintain a competitive environment when open tenders are not feasible. They are used when public interest, specialization, or urgency requires alternatives to open tenders.
How do we decide which type of tender to choose?
That's a good question. Let me show you. The selection of the appropriate tender type depends on the following factors. The estimated cost of the project helps determine the suitability of open or limited tendering. A reasonable number of bidders is essential to ensure fair competition and avoid favoritism. Critical works like breaches or emergencies may require expedited or specialized tendering. Specialized expertise or skilled contractors are considered when choosing the tender type. Complex or highly technical works often demand processes like special limited tenders. Approved contractors are preferred, but credentials may be verified if required. Let's delve deeper into the evaluation of the technical bid by exploring some of its major criteria. Click on each element in sequence to access the major criteria. Experience. As per general terms conditions issued by GEM for service contracts for tenders on Government e-Marketplace or GEM, pronunciation GEM, the bidder must have completed 3 similar services costing at least 40% of the estimated cost, 2 similar services costing at least 50%, or 1 similar service costing at least 80%. As per general conditions of contracts for services issued by Railway Board in 2018 and amended from time to time, the bidder must have completed 1 similar service contract in the last 3 financial years and the current financial year, worth at least 35% of the advertised bid value. Ongoing service contracts can be considered if payments amount to at least 35% of the advertised bid value. Similar service contracts are defined by the competent authority as per specific criteria. Work experience certificates from private individuals are not accepted. Certificates from public listed companies, private companies, or trusts with annual turnover exceeding 500 crore rupees are accepted if issued from their head office by an authorized person. Bidders will be qualified only if they meet the following financial requirements. Annual average financial turnover should be at least 1.5 times the advertised bid value during the last 3 financial years and the current year up to the tender opening date. The audited balance sheet, certified by a chartered accountant with stamp, signature, and membership number, will be considered. Bidders should have access to or available liquid assets, lines of credit, and other financial means to meet cash flow, valued at 5% of the estimated bid value, net of commitments for other contracts. The audited balance sheet and/or banking reference, certified by a chartered accountant with stamp, signature, and membership number, must be submitted with the bid. The banking reference should specify the amount the bank can lend for the work to the bidder or the joint venture consortium member. If the net current assets from the balance sheets are negative, only banking references will be considered. If the net current assets are positive, the aggregate of the net current assets and submitted banking references will be considered to assess liquidity. A clear reference from the bank outlining the available loan amount is required for financial assessment. So, Ankit, in evaluating financial bids, the lowest bidder is selected, but if there's a tie in price, the bidder with stronger technical qualifications wins. If technical scores are also tied, the bidder with higher financial turnover over the last 3 years is chosen.
Okay, and financial standing matters if technical scores are tied?
Yes, and GEM randomly picks the L1 bidder in case of a tie. These criteria are further detailed in General Conditions of Contract for Services issued and amended by Railway Board from time to time. Before we move forward, let's check your knowledge about types of tenders. Drag and drop the answers in front of the scenarios in the drop boxes. Now that we have covered the types of bids and qualification criteria, let's move on to understanding the rights of railways in managing bids.
That's interesting, Meera. What specific rights does the railways have when dealing with bids?
Let me explain. The rights protected by the railways in terms of dealing with bids are to reject bids wholly or partially without explanation, accept bids without being bound to the lowest, cancel tenders if a bidder provides false data or influences decisions, terminate tenders if a bidder or firm partner passes away post-submission, cancel procurement if the lowest bidder withdraws, offering the next bidder to match the original price. Reject GEM services per SLA within 10 days, unless stated otherwise. The Indian Railways reserves the right, even after the bid is awarded, to monitor and ensure that the work is being executed effectively and in accordance with the agreed terms and conditions. The railways may replace contractors served with a performance notice through a new tender. Banned contractors cannot bid for remaining services unless performance improves, cancelling the bidding. Financial bids open only after the existing contract is terminated. Weekly performance reviews determine revocation or continuation of notices. If unsatisfactory, a performance improvement notice is issued, followed by contract termination if no action is taken. If no action is taken, the contract is terminated and further measures are implemented after a 7-day notice. And A similar policy applies to contracts on the GEM portal, as outlined in the GEM Incident Management Policy. To sum up, the pre-bid rights ensure that the railway sets clear conditions and expectations before the bidding process, establishing transparency from the start.
And once the bid is awarded, the post-bid rights allow for necessary adjustments, but these changes must be legally and operationally justified.
That's right, Ankit. Both rights help maintain a balance between the railways and the contractors, ensuring fairness and flexibility in the entire process.
So in essence, these rights help streamline the bidding process while ensuring the railways can adapt when needed, without compromising fairness.
You have grasped the concept really well, Ankit. Well done.
Thank you, Meera. I am glad I could follow along.
Before we move forward, let me tell you that all these conditions and criteria are detailed in General Conditions of Contract 2018 issued and amended from time to time and the Government e-Marketplace, that is GEM General Terms and Conditions, GTC. These can be referred for delving deep into the topic. Now let's check your knowledge about rights of railways to deal with bids. What happens if the contractor's performance is unsatisfactory after the first week following the performance notice? Select the correct option and click Submit. Now that we understand the railway's rights in managing bids, let's explore how changes in service contracts are handled during execution.
Is there a set process for it?
Absolutely. Changes in service contracts are managed through defined procedures and variation limits.
There's still a lot left for me to understand.
Service contracts in railway operations often require flexibility to address changing needs and project requirements. This flexibility is built into the contract terms to allow modifications in scope, quantity, or methodology without invalidating the agreement, and understanding the procedures and limits for these variations is essential for contractors and managers to ensure compliance and smooth execution. Click on each element to learn more about variation in service contracts. A manager here means the officer of the user department who is the executive in charge of the service contract. The manager, on behalf of the railway, has the power to modify contracts to address project needs. They can make necessary changes in design, scope, or execution method to ensure project efficiency to enlarge, extend, diminish, or reduce services. Alter the design, character, position, site, quantities, dimensions, or method of execution. Modify the combination and use of materials. Add new services or cancel existing ones. Contractors are not entitled to any compensation clause for increases or decreases in the work quantities. Payment will be made for the actual work done and approved materials supplied per specific orders. Unless specified in special conditions, the variation limit for individual items is plus minus 25% of the originally contracted quantity. Contractors must execute services within this limit at agreed rates, and no claims or compensation will be entertained for variations within this range. Contract validity remains intact, and payments are based on pre-agreed rates even after variations. Variations do not invalidate the contract and must be executed as per original terms, and payment will be based on the accepted schedule of rates. In situations where an increase in the quantity of an individual item exceeds 25% of the agreement quantity and is unavoidable, the following procedure for quantity variations must be adhered to. For a fresh tender requirement, any increase beyond 25% should ideally be executed by floating a fresh tender. If impractical, the quantity can be operated beyond 125% of the agreement quantity under specific conditions. For an approval for variations beyond 125%, operation of quantities exceeding 125% requires approval from an officer of at least SA grade rank. Payment adjustments for increased quantities. 125% to 140% of agreement quantity, paid at 98% of the awarded rate for the item in the tender. 140% to 150% of agreement quantity, paid at 96% of the awarded rate for the item in the tender. Beyond 150%, prohibited under normal circumstances and allowed only in exceptional, unavoidable cases with concurrence from associate finance, and payment at 96% of the awarded rate for the item. When we talk about the procedure for quantity variations, in situations when we are looking at applicability to individual items only, these rules apply exclusively to individual items and not the overall contract value. For variation in overall contract value, there is a limitations on overall agreement value. Execution of quantities exceeding 150% of the total agreement value is not allowed under normal circumstances. For exceptional cases for variations beyond 150%, if deemed necessary, such increases must be handled through floating fresh tenders, negotiations with the existing contractor, and prior concurrence of the FA and CAO or FA and CAO. An approval from the general manager is mandatory. Specific processes ensure fairness and control for decrease in quantities during execution. In situations with reduction up to 25% is allowed without financial concurrence, and reduction beyond 25% requires approval of an SA grade officer. Finance concurrence. A no-claim certificate from the contractor. Certification that the reduced work will not be required later. If we talk about special cases, a minor value item is defined as one whose original agreement value is less than 1% of the total original agreement value with variation limit of more than 100%. For SOR items, the 25% variation limit applies to the entire SOR schedule value, not individual items, and for NS items, the 25% variation limit applies to each individual item, regardless of the rate quoting method, single percentage or item-wise. If we talk about the approval for zonal railway tenders, variations will be approved based on the revised agreement value within the delegated authority, and for general manager approved tenders, variations up to 125% of the original agreement value can be approved by the general manager.
So, schedule of rates is for the schedule and NS is for individual items. Right?
Yes. For schedule of rates items, The 25% variation applies to the whole schedule, but for NS items, the 25% variation is applied to each individual item, no matter the rate quoting method.
These rules ensure clarity and proper management of contract variations while maintaining fairness for all stakeholders involved.
Exactly. Following these ensures smooth execution without compromising on fairness or accountability. Before we move forward, let's check your knowledge about the feasibility of variation in service contracts. A contractor requests an increase in the quantity of a specific item by 130% of the original agreement. The guidelines specify that such increases require approval before proceeding. Who must approve the operation of quantities exceeding 125% of the original agreement? Drag and drop the correct approvers into the circles in the designated drop area. And now we will talk about our last topic of the day: key considerations for bill processing and contractor compliance.
You mean the checks railways need to perform before processing these payments?
Absolutely. When managing contractor relationships, particularly in large organizations like railways, it is essential to ensure that the processes related to contractor bills are handled with precision and in full compliance with legal requirements. Changes in service contracts are managed through defined procedures and variation limits. Here are the key pointers to consider in this process. Ensure that all contractor bill processes are managed efficiently while adhering to legal requirements. Passing contractor bills is not merely a financial task but a critical process to meet legal obligations and maintain transparency. Both the contractor and the organization must fulfill their responsibilities under the law, including labor laws and statutory requirements. The process must be transparent, allowing both parties to verify that all terms are met and obligations are fulfilled. Safeguard the welfare of workers by ensuring contractors meet standards for wages, benefits, and working conditions, and proper documentation and certification by both the contractor and the organization are essential to ensure legitimacy and compliance. Let's first address the responsibilities railways must fulfill when processing contractor bills. Click on each element to learn more. Prior to bill processing, all essential records related to the contractor's work and compliance must be verified and certified by the contractor to confirm the accuracy of details submitted, the employee nominated by the principal employer, to ensure oversight from the railway side. This dual-earth certification helps maintain transparency and safeguards against fraudulent claims, and certified records should include wage payment registers, attendance details, and statutory compliance documents. Railways must ensure that contractors pay workers gross minimum wages as mandated by law. This includes basic wages and benefits such as employee state insurance, ESI, and Provident Fund, PF, contributions. Contractors failing to meet these obligations must be reported to the Regional Labour Commissioner. The report must include evidence of non-payment or discrepancies in wage records and Railways may hold payments to contractors until wage compliance is verified. Contractors with repeated violations of labor laws, specifically 3 or more penalties in the past 2 years, will be barred from participating in tenders. Railways must verify the contractor's track record with enforcement agencies like the Labour Commissioner and maintain records of disqualified contractors to ensure consistent enforcement of this rule. This process discourages non-compliance and ensures only responsible contractors are engaged. Contractors are required to submit monthly records of statutory obligations, including ESI and PF contributions. Supporting documents as outlined in the agreement conditions. Submission deadlines must be strictly monitored, as bills cannot be passed without these records, and non-compliance by the contractor may lead to penalties or withholding of payments. Contractors and their employees to the Employees Provident Fund Organization (EPFO) portal monthly. This includes employee names, PF account numbers, and contribution amounts. Cross-verification with EPFO ensures that contractors have fulfilled their obligations, and any discrepancies must be flagged and resolved before bill clearance. Contractors must complete registration on the Indian Railway Shramik Kalyan Portal (IRSKP) within 15 days of receiving the letter of acceptance (LOA). Monthly updates are required to ensure ongoing compliance. Updates must include the number of laborers employed, detailed wage payments made, and railways should monitor IRSKP data regularly to identify any anomalies or irregularities. Ankit, do you have any questions about the procedures or compliance requirements?
Yes, Meera. I wanted to clarify a point. When verifying statutory compliance documents, who is responsible for cross-checking the details?
Great question. The responsibility for verifying statutory compliance documents lies with both the contractor and the railway's nominated employee. The contractor ensures the accuracy of their submissions, while the nominated employee ensures compliance and transparency from our side.
That makes sense. Thanks for the clarification, Meera. I'll make sure to keep these steps in mind when reviewing contractor bills.
Now let's have a look at the additional obligations for contractors. Contractors must strictly follow the provisions of Certification of Records, the Contract Labour, Regulation and Abolition Act, 1970, governing the engagement and conditions of contract labour. The Minimum Wages Act, 1948, ensuring fair compensation for workers. The Employees Provident Fund and Miscellaneous Provisions Act, 1952, safeguarding retirement benefits. The Factories Act, 1948, establishing workplace safety standards, and railways should verify compliance periodically by auditing contractor records and visiting work sites. These sites can be provided free of charge or based on specified terms. Contractors must ensure that camps meet minimum standards for safety, sanitation, and living conditions, and inspections should be carried out periodically to uphold standards. As we have seen, these guidelines ensure the entire process, from worker welfare to bill payments, is transparent and legally compliant.
It's impressive how these measures emphasize both accountability and the rights of workers.
Absolutely. When implemented correctly, this framework fosters trust, reduces disputes, and ensures fairness for all stakeholders involved.
I agree.
Let's check your knowledge so far on key considerations for bill processing and contractor compliance. Which of the following amenities must the contractor provide for workers, and what role should the railways play? Select the correct option and click Submit. Example, zone and special works, and stores contracts, for example, material procurement, covering construction, repair, and material supply via various bidding processes. Service contracts focus on non-material services like housekeeping, consultancy, and professional services, addressing the increased demand for non-operational services. Key steps in contract management include preparing estimates, defining scope, designing drawings, and ensuring compliance with eligibility criteria, with estimates needing competent authority approval for large works. Service contracts use earnest money deposit (EMD) for bidder commitment and performance bank guarantee (PBG) to ensure deadlines and quality. EMD depends on the contract value, while PBG is 5% of the total value. Both are subject to revision from time to time. Bidders must submit one bid, avoid bankruptcy, be free from government bans, and not have conflicts of interest. JV rules include a limit on members-led member responsibility and restrictions on changing JV composition after bid submission. Legal documents like the MOU and partnership deeds are required. Bidders may be disqualified for employing retired railway officers, violating labor laws, or having a terminated penalized contract in the last 2 years. Bid evaluation uses technical and financial assessments with two-package system for contracts over 50 lakh rupees and QCBS for consultancy. Tenders are used based on the nature of work and urgency, including open tenders, limited tenders, and single tenders. Each has specific conditions for inviting bids, especially for urgent or specialized works. Railways can reject bids, cancel contracts, or replace underperforming contractors, with performance issues potentially leading to termination. Railways must ensure that contractors pay gross minimum wages, including ESI and PF, and report any non-payment to the Regional Labour Commissioner. Contractors must register on the Indian Railway Shramik Kalyan portal, providing necessary details and updating contract laborer information monthly. Now it's time for the final assessment. Let's test your knowledge of this module. This assessment consists of 10 multiple-choice questions. The passing grade is 80%, which means you need to answer at least 8 out of 10 questions correctly to attain the badge. Each question carries 1 point. There is no negative marking. To begin, click Start.